You unlock this door. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of sound. A dimension of sight. A dimension of mind. You've just crossed over into
Common Sense Zone.
America's heading for an economic 9/11. This isn't about dark clouds. This is about reality. And when I hear these economists talking, I'm wondering what they're looking at. I'll give you an example. When they add up the inflation numbers, core inflation, they don't put in food and fuel. Who are they kidding? The real people, the working people in this country are already in a recession. Just look at the numbers. Median household income, half above, half below, is below 1999 levels. For the real working people, when they're going to the pump, there's a recession. People saying this housing crunch is going to be over in 3 months, it's just beginning. And by the way, the subprime problem, that's the crack in the foundation. It's going to topple like the World Trade Center from the top. All these deals that were being done by these bigwigs, you take companies like Macklow in New York City, $7 billion worth of real estate with 30 million down. Who does deals like this? And these kind of deals have been doing all over the world.
Fed says, listen, we're not minimizing this, that this is a non-existent problem, but we believe that where there'll be some losses, there'll also be some growth. There'll be ebbs and flows, was what Bernanke and also the Treasury Secretary have had to say, that, you know what, it's not all dark clouds. We're going to get out of this. This is a correction. When you hear that, your reaction is?
It's jive talk. I mean, look, we said back in our Trends Journal in March 20th of this year, the Fed was in a rate trap. We said if they lower rates, they crash the dollar. Voila, the dollar's crashed, they lowered rates. You hear all these people on Wall Street yelling to low rates. If they raise rates, they crash the economy. The game is over. And the Fed is highly responsible for doing this by bailing out their buddies with cheap money over and over again. This trend has been long in the making, and now it's come home to roost.
Right.
You know the people that know it? The people on the street. They're the ones that know. Not on Wall Street, on the real street. There's the media world, the political world, and the real world. In the real world, people know what's going on.
Gerald, you guys have been, and I don't know if it's you guys or maybe just you, been right on the money with a lot of these predictions. I mean, I can go through a list. You know, you predicted what the dot-com bubble before it happened, the real estate bubble and the crash before it happened,
that's right,
and the war in Iraq, and on and on and on. Your thoughts on the next president? Who will it be?
Well, here's we're saying.
How do you handle that tough one?
Well, this is we say Obama if it's the economy, McCain if it's war.
If we do end up going to war with Iran, then and November will be McCain.
And that's the climate in October, November. It's McCain. If it's the economy, it's Obama.
You paint a really bleak picture that we could be facing a depression as great or worse than the Great Depression. You're talking about tax revolts, gas riots, people living in self-storage units.
You look at our Trends Journal. We predicted these before they would happen. I'll tell you why the Depression is going to be worse than the last one. With the last Depression, most people didn't own homes. There was no such thing as home equity loans. Our parents didn't have credit cards.
All right.
The consumer wasn't $14 trillion in debt, and the government wasn't $9 trillion in debt. They had surpluses, both budget and trade. Then we heard from the Bank of America today. They're saying that they don't expect this to end by the second quarter of next year. I mean, how do they know? They didn't see it coming. Now they're saying when it's going to end. Look at today's news. What did you just read about the Dow? We're heading toward 10,000. That's the next level.
Yeah.
And some people are talking 8,000.
He predicted the stock market crash of 1987 and the breakup of the Soviet Union. And that man joins us right now. Good morning.
Buongiorno.
Yeah, we appreciate your time this year. So this year, you're predicting a Category 5 economy.
The big news is interest rates, and the Federal Reserve has to raise interest rates to keep the value of the dollar high, because the United States is reliant on outside investors, and they don't want to get paid back with cheap dollars. The downside, of course, is the economy is already slowing down. We see it in home sales, not great retail sales for Christmas. So the big news is, as we look at it, watch gold. Gold prices could go to the stratosphere.
This expert's dire prediction that America's economic system faces almost total collapse is getting a lot of attention.
We're going to go into a depression that's going to be worse than the Great Depression.
Futurist Gerald Celente forecasts a doomsday scenario.
You actually believe that there's going to be a revolution, food riots, tax riots. It's going to get that bad?
It's going to get that bad. When people get hungry and desperate, things get ugly. And I'll tell you something else why it's going to really get ugly. Crime is going to go to levels we've never seen before. We're not perfect. We don't walk on water. But I'll tell you what, I'll put my track record up against any trend forecasters in the world.
So what's to come in 2009? Joining me now to answer that question is Gerald Celente, founder and director of the Trends Research Institute. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure.
How would you define the economic trend that you have forecasted for 2009?
We're going to see an economic collapse, the likes of which the world has never seen before. And it's not only in the United States, it's going global. At the end of 2008, we saw Christmas sales, retail sales. Women's apparel down 23%. Home furnishings and electronics off 27%. Luxury items down 35%. These are Depression-era collapses. We saw major bankruptcies. Circuit City. We saw linens and things. One bankruptcy after another. Then we saw store closings. Starbucks, Home Depot, down the line. The question becomes, who is going to take all of the vacant retail space? Who is going to rent it? The answer is nobody. Now we look at the financial collapse in 2008. You saw the Merrill Lynch mob go under, the Bear Stearns gang go out of business, the Lehman boys, they went bankrupt. You saw bond companies, brokerage firms, banks go belly up or bought out. Who's going to rent all the vacant commercial business space that they used to occupy? The answer is nobody. The commercial real estate collapse that's going to happen in 2009 is going to dwarf the residential real estate collapse.
You use the Great Depression as an analogy, as a comparison. During the Great Depression, unemployment was at 25%. Now it has increased. It's at, I think, over 7.2. Is that number going to get much, much bigger?
We have to look at the real number. There's two sets of books the government keeps. When they measure up unemployment, they don't add in the people who are no longer looking for jobs because they've become discouraged and can't find any after looking so long. And they don't include part-time workers. When you put that number into it, the number is 13.7%, and that's a government number. And this is just beginning. And again, current events form future trends. What did we see? We saw in one day 61,000 jobs evaporate off the map. You're going to see Great Depression numbers. Because as I'm mentioning with this real estate, commercial real estate collapse, all of these retail stores closing, Starbucks, Macy's, you go down the line, you look at not only the people that work for these places that no longer have jobs, but how about all the support industries, the advertising, the manufacturers of products that are going to be laying off people as well. We're going to see Great Depression numbers. And matter of fact, this is going to be worse than the Great Depression.
What are we going to see happening to the society, to people's day-to-day lives in terms of how they treat one another, how they behave, crime?
When I say it's going to be worse than the Great Depression, we call this the Greatest Depression. And by the way, to be using 1930s models to get us out of this is really stupid. Back then, when we first crashed, most people didn't own homes. There was no such thing as a home equity loan. And back then, people didn't have credit cards. The consumer wasn't $14 trillion in debt. We had a manufacturing base that built the world out of the Great Depression following World War II. We no longer have that.